The two current kings of full-frame mirrorless cameras. The Sony A7 III is a universally praised, established workhorse of a camera that might very well be the best camera released in 2018. Whereas the new EOS R comes equipped with a whole heaping amount of controversy, but has a surprisingly robust image and a very, very easy to use body. Which one will work best for you to create your online content? Let's find out. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. We're doing the double cameras today. First time we've ever done this. I'm excited. Let me know in the comments if you like this. You can see the cameras the whole video. Whoo boy, am I so excited to make this video, even though I am sure there will be some fire in the comments down below. These are two of the most polarizing brands on the market today. They're kind of like the Apple and Android of the camera world. You know, people on either side will probably be angry when somebody chooses the middle option. So Nikon, hurry up. I know you released the Z7. Go ahead and release the Z6 because that's one that I'm interested in and we can get you involved in all of this anger discussion. So let's get the obvious out of the way first. I've spent way more time using Sony cameras than I have almost anything else. I've used the A6300, A6500, A7 III, RX100 5, 6, 5 Alpha, the FDRX 3000, just all sorts of Sony cameras. So I am very comfortable with the image they produce and the functionality of their cameras. So it's something that I am very comfortable with. I am not as familiar with Canon cameras. Canon always surprises me for how much I like their cameras, even though they are far from ever really being the technical kings. The M50 was one of the most abused cameras on the internet, but I found it to be a very easy to use, very good image quality, very nice mirrorless camera that for the price was really great. And the Canon SL2 is probably the best budget camera you can get for video, period. Basically what I'm trying to say is I do like both camera companies and I'm not really a fanboy of either, despite what you might think as this video goes. In fact, I'm such a non-fanboy of these two companies. This is the second time I'm making this video. I originally edited one, had it uploaded, and it was receiving very good views for a channel of my size, but I didn't like how the Sony looked. I was giving it an improper view. So we are currently now with no picture profile on either cameras. The Canon's on auto. This is on no picture profile. This is as basic as I can get the cameras to be set up. They're the exact same settings. And that's just, I don't want to be a fanboy. I want the image to speak for itself. So first things first, let's cover the basic specs of both cameras to get us all on the same page. So let's go age before beauty. And let's start with the A7 III, because the A7 III is a monster camera for a monster price. The A7 III has a 24 megapixel full frame BSI CMOS sensor. It has 693 phase detection autofocus points. It can record in 4K up to 30 frames per second. There is a small crop at 30 frames per second. It has in-body image stabilization. It has a focus capable touchscreen. The most important part for me is it has the larger Z-type battery. It also has dual SD card memory slots and a USB-C port that can be used to charge the camera from power outlet. Those are some pretty darn good specs. And truthfully, from a technical point of view, there's only one real camera, in my opinion, that tops it for the price and feature list, and that's the Fuji X-T3. I really, really, really like the Fuji X-T3. I've got videos on it if you want to see it. But the Canon is no slouch either. The EOS R has a 30 megapixel full frame dual pixel CMOS sensor. It has a fully articulating rear LCD. It comes equipped with Canon's best in class dual pixel autofocus. It can record in 4K 30 frames per second from a 1.8 crop on the sensor, which hurts to say. It can do 10-bit 422 over HDMI or 8-bit 420 internal, and it can do charging from its USB-C port, but only with certain brands of batteries. Physically, both cameras feel awesome. Now, I know some people do not like the shape of Sony cameras, but I've never really had an issue with them, and I'm probably on the smaller hand size of the regular people. I mean, I think I have regular size hands, and the Sony fits me perfectly well. But I don't want to take away from the EOS R because it feels amazing to hold. Like I said in my EOS R unboxing video, before the R, my favorite camera to hold was the GH5. It's like a camera that was perfectly designed to fit my hand. It was wonderful. However, in the last week of using the EOS R, it is even better. I mean, it just perfectly fits, and it's my favorite camera ever to hold. But feeling alone doesn't mean much, especially, as we can see right now, my cameras spend the majority of their lives on tripods. So let's talk about the physical buttons and dials. Now, both do pretty well. I personally like the A7 III's physical layout better. I like having a dedicated mode dial button that lets me switch around photo mode, video mode, and slow motion mode within seconds. I don't have to mess around with menu systems or other things like I do in the EOS R. Not only that, but it has a huge amount of customization for almost every single button. And it really lets you make the camera your own. When you're using the A7 III, you're not using Sony's camera, you're using your camera. You know, I use the Everyday Dad's camera, your camera is you're using your camera. The EOS R takes a different path when it comes to customization. You can customize almost everything about the dials. Now, not only can you customize the dials, but the new RF lens have an additional control ring on the front that lets you change settings from the ring itself. So the way that I have mine set up, I'm on a Sigma lens right now, so I can't show you, but I have it set to control the ISO. So from the front of the camera, I can change my exposure without having to mess with the menus, which is a huge benefit. I really do like that functionality. But like I said, I don't change my shutter or aperture very much, which you can also use to set the control ring for. So however you dial in your exposure, you can do it from in front of the camera, which is a huge boon because we have the articulating screen, the autofocus. You can do everything you need to dial in your image from in front of the camera, which is huge. Okay, that's enough talking at the cameras. Let's get into my top 3 categories that matter to me when I'm recommending cameras. First up, let's get the controversial one out of the way. First, image quality. Now, if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know that technical image quality is not something that I ever strive for. You do need to have a certain amount of image quality, but, and this is something I say often, if you look at who is watching online videos, most people are not watching in 1080p or 4K. They're watching in like 140p, 360p, whatever the P's are. You know, they'll watch it from the bathroom. It's not that big of a deal. This is really gonna come down to what you require out of the camera because both of these approach video in different ways. The Sony A7 III can do a cropless, full frame 4K at 24 frames per second, which is legitimate. I record everything in 30 frames per second, and it does add a bit of a small crop to the video. Plus, the Sony does its 4K at 100 megabits per second. The Sony also has IBIS built in, and it can do 120 frames per second in 1080p. The EOS R can also do 4K 30 frames per second, but like we said earlier, it does so with a huge crop. So the kit lens that comes with it is a 24-105, but is actually a 40-178-ish because of the crop if you're recording in 4K. The EOS R though has some beefier codecs. It has two. It has the IPB and All-I. The All-I is in the 400 megabits range, and the IPB, the smaller one, is 120 megabits per second, which is still more than the A7 III's codec. You can get more data into the EOS R than you can the Sony. But I mean, both are gonna produce an awesome image for you. Now, I know that that's not a popular opinion because we all like to pick what we have and then, you know, be very tribalistic about it, but either camera will be fine. Next up, ecosystem. I mention this an awful lot, but a camera's ecosystem can be far more important than the body itself. Without a strong ecosystem holding a camera up, you don't have anything to grow into. And that can be super limiting, which is probably not something you wanna hear after you've just dropped, you know, 3 mints. You've dropped at least 3 mints on these cameras. They're expensive. You want to get the most out of them. And this isn't really a contest. The Sony E-mount has been making lenses for a long time now. They've got a very stacked set of lenses that covers basically everything that you could want focal range wise. They've got some of the best lenses out there with their G Master line. They are crushing it for the full frame mirrorless ecosystem. Their lenses are very expensive, but that argument doesn't really hold as much water because the RF lenses are very expensive too. Sony's ecosystem is way more mature than the Canon RF, but the Canon has an ace in its sleeve in the ecosystem department that could change a lot of things when it comes to DSLR style video recorders. The RF line will grow in time. If you're looking for native mirrorless lenses for the EOS R, you have a very small choice. I think there's only 4 that are projected to come out right now. However, the really cool thing is that you can get a lot of adapters for the EOS R. Currently, we're using the adapter with a Sigma 18-35, which is a very easy way to get back into Canon's EF lenses, and Canon's EF lenses basically is the largest lens selection on earth, so you can get a reasonably priced adapter. This one's 99 bucks, and you can put on a whole range of other lenses. But the coolest adapter that I've seen, there's an ND filter style adapter, which means you can put an ND filter between the sensor and the back of the lens instead of having to screw one on, which kind of takes the EOS R from being more of a DSLR style camera and turns it into like a quasi cinema style camera that lets you get ND on all of your lenses. I'm very excited about that one. It's the thing that I am most excited about for the EOS R. Last and most important to me, fiddliness. What is fiddliness and why is it the most important aspect of cameras ever? Well, I'm glad you asked. Have a seat and let me tell you a story. Fiddliness is measured by how long it takes for me to turn on the camera, start filming, and get footage that is good enough for me to start editing and uploading. If I have to mess around with my camera instead of recording, I'll either miss my shot or I'll just get so frustrated with the camera that I won't use it. Frankly, I do not have time to baby equipment. If equipment doesn't work, it gets sold or returned or it gets rid of. I get rid of it very quickly. I don't have time with my content schedule to mess around with stuff that doesn't work. So I need gear, and I only use and get gear that works. So the Sony really crushed it in the ecosystem department, but this one swings all the way back to the EOS R. And the EOS R is by far and away one of the easiest cameras I have ever used in my life. Look, straight up, the Sony is a great camera. It has awesome autofocus, it's super customizable, it is really easy to get a good looking image straight out of the camera. But the EOS R is on a whole other level. Not only does it have a fully articulating touchscreen that I'm looking at right now, so I can see myself, I can frame myself, I can check my exposure in front of the camera. That touchscreen lets me change settings from in front of the camera, and if I have the RF lens, I can dial in my exposure without having to mess with any settings. I can dial in my exposure without having to mess with any digital stuff. It's just so easy to use. Seriously, I know it's easy to start talking in hyperbole when you get excited about a new piece of kit, but using the EOS R over the last week has been a dream because of how easy it is to use. You just put it on a tripod, hit record, get going. It is straight up awesome, and the EOS R does not deserve all the hate it's been getting. So what, right? So which of these cameras is the best one for making online content? Like we started out the video, it depends on what you need. Do you need a wider angle or even the ability to do full frame 4K at 24 frames per second? Then you need to get the A7 III because the Canon can't do that. Do you need slow motion 1080p 120 frames per second or in-body image stabilization? Well, you gotta go with the A7 III because the Canon can't do that either, unfortunately. 720p 120 frames per second, that's a joke. But do you want something that is really easy to use, has a very strong internal codec, and can look fantastic right out of the camera? Then the Canon EOS R is a very good option. I've been incredibly impressed since starting to use it. I got this camera thinking that I wouldn't like it, I'd just make a couple videos about it and be done with it, but I am very impressed with the EOS R. It's super easy to use, and I really like the image quality. But both are great in different ways and could serve you, either of you. I'm pointing at both cameras this time. They can serve you perfectly well, and that's the really good news, is there isn't a bad choice. Either will work. We live in awesome times for cameras. Thanks for watching.